Good evening. My name is Jared Hubbard, and I am a project manager for the City of Rochester. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to attend tonight's webinar and its first of its kind virtual open house for the City of Rochester. We recognize that COVID-19 is causing challenges for everyone, and we understand that the impact of this virus extends beyond those who get sick. If you have non-medical questions about COVID-19, please call the City of Rochester's information hotline at 507-328-2822. That's 507-328-2822, where city teammates can help you find the answers to your questions. We are fortunate to live in a community where medical expertise abounds, and we are able to lean on our friends at Mayo Clinic and Olmsted Medical Center to do what they do best. Meanwhile, at the City of Rochester, our job is to help preserve our community lifelines as we navigate this crisis. But it's also to position our city for the future so that we can come out of this stronger, more resilient, and ready to embrace a new normal. Thank you for your attention and commitment to improving the community in which we live, work, and play. We look forward to your feedback. That said, this process started with a public engagement process back in February. For the month of April, we're in phase 2. Phase 2 includes 3 webinars. Tonight is the second of those 3. The next webinar will occur on Tuesday, April 21st. For more information on the project, we ask that you visit the project webpage. There, you'll be able to sign up for the webinar next week. You'll be able to view the video from the first webinar on April 7th, and then this webinar as well, in roughly a week as well. Also on the website, you'll be able to find the slides from tonight's presentation and from the previous and from the future presentation as well. We ask that you utilize our interactive open house webpage and answer the survey questions that are at the end of every geographic section. More on that in a second. And also on the webpage, you can find our frequently asked questions. Through the month of April, we're asking you to provide feedback in one of 3 formats. The first form is the interactive open house webpage or story map. Through this tool, you'll be able to utilize geographic maps to look at the scenarios and station locations that we have planned for you tonight and throughout this process. Like I said earlier, at the end of each section, there are survey questions that we'll ask you. We'll preview many of those questions tonight to get you prepared for that time. We also ask that if you have feedback, you can provide it to us by email at rapidtransit@rochestermm.gov, or you can utilize our voicemail at 507-328-2025. Now for a quick word about what we're going to do tonight. We'll have a brief introduction to the project again and review its purpose. Then we'll quickly move to a thorough review of the 2nd Street corridor. We'll first start with west of US 52 and then move to the east side of the highway and mainly focus on from St. Mary's Hospital to 6th Avenue. Once again, we'll conclude with ways that you can provide feedback and provide us more information. Tonight, we are asking that you can interact with myself and the rest of the presenters in one of 2 formats. The first is you can continue to use the Q&A button on your toolbar. This will allow you to type out your question and submit it. Hopefully we'll have time to maybe answer a few of those questions at the end. The focus of our tonight and the primary form that you'll be able to interact with us is through the raise your hand feature. This will allow you to ask a question live. We have set aside 3 times during tonight's presentation where we'll pause the presentation and call on you to ask your question. You can be called on by pressing the raise your hand button. All we ask is that if you hear the answer to your question, that you go ahead and press that button again to lower your hand. Like I said, we'll pause at a few different times through the presentation to answer your question. One of us, myself maybe, will come on and recognize you, and we will unmute your mic and give you a little bit of time to ask your question. After asking several questions, we'll move back to the presentation and continue forward. At that time, anyone whose hand has been raised, we will lower and start again with a new question. With that, I thank you all one last time, and I'll hand it off to Chris Hall of the consulting firm SOM to walk us through the process of the rest of the night. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jarrett. And I'll also be joined in this conversation by Adele Hall, who is a co-consultant with us and with SRF Engineering, and she'll be talking about some of the elements of this component of the study also. We wanted to say at the beginning that the overall purpose of the transit-oriented development plan is to link and think in a comprehensive way to link and think about the economic development, transit supportive land uses, public realm options, and infrastructure opportunities that go along with this. This is an incredible opportunity for the city as it grows and as it takes advantage of its kind of unique economic assets and its role in the state and also the nation and internationally. So we wanted to ground some things at the beginning in terms of just confirming what the route is for the proposed rapid transit system. Beginning at the West Transit Village, continuing along 2nd Street, which is what we will focus on today, across Highway 52 to the core downtown area, and then heading south on Broadway Avenue and ending at another East Transit Village. And there'll be a number of stations along the way. And the location of those stations is something that we'll talk about tonight as we focus on the 2nd Street corridor. The purpose really is to enable Rochester's growth and also to think about how we can advance economic objectives, which are incredibly important in this time, but also thinking about some of the other overarching objectives that we have for the city, improving well-being, enhancing quality of life, but also making sure that people can move around and have as many options for moving around Rochester as possible and this central corridor within Rochester. We do want to see very vital, active places created. We want to make sure that this works for existing neighborhoods and that there are gains and amenities and benefits for neighborhoods as well. In addition to new transit activities, but thinking about public realm, public spaces, and other amenities. And really at the heart of this is the idea of linking transit and growth locations and using each to shape the other. There's a very clear objective for the city to support a dynamic downtown, which is very strong today, but there is lots of interest in bringing more activity out onto the streets and bringing a lot of the economic and human activity into a more visible place within the city. Supporting neighborhoods and making sure they're livable and making sure that we can also accommodate a wide range of people with different incomes and different lifestyles and different employment roles to support a diverse housing market. We'd also like to see a shift in the number of commuter trips, which are currently carried out by people driving, often alone, but driving in their cars into parking ramps in the center of the city and finding other ways for people to move around. And if they do drive, to park once and then be able to move around the city through all kinds of other ways, whether it's walking, transit, or cycling. Next. And as some background, this is not the first step in the process. This is actually the culmination of a series of steps which have identified the need for additional transit capacity and routing and rapid transit over a series of plans over the last decade or so. And these have confirmed the need for a plan, a transit system, which is what we're now looking at in more detail. And what we want to talk about in this round of engagement is really looking in more detail at individual corridor segments. And tonight we'll look at the first two, what we're calling the West Gateway and also the City Corridor. And these are really the Second Street Corridor. And then next week we'll talk in more detail about Broadway. But key things that we will be talking about, and we wanted to offer some definitions at the beginning. Connectivity, and this is about where stations are located, what the walking and bike routes may be, land uses, which are a wide variety of activities, and thinking about where you locate those and how they mix together. Heights and density, which is really the scale of development. And then public realm, which is parks, riverfronts, plazas, streetscapes, the spaces that we all use between buildings. And next. And just some key milestones in terms of the transit-oriented development planning study. So this study that we're talking about tonight, as Jarrett said, we had a first round of consultation in February. We are carrying out another round of consultation right now, this month. And then there will be a future round in July, where we are really looking at, in much more detail, at station area concepts as a basis for then a final plan and implementation, and looking towards council adoption and submission of a funding application to the federal government in September. Okay, next. So we wanted to step back and also talk about the role of the relationship between this transit investment and growth. So I'm going to hand off to Adele now, who's going to take us through some of this information.
Thanks, Chris. So this slide shows, the graphic on the right shows a transition from a 71% motor vehicle share into downtown to 43% motor vehicle share. And the reason, one of the main reasons driving this need for a transition away from private vehicles coming into downtown and toward transit, carpool, biking and walking into downtown is because the city of Rochester is projected to grow so much. And we're talking about almost 40,000 new residents in the next 20 years. So, and at the same time, Olmsted County is also expected to add about 37,000 new jobs by 2040. And a lot of this growth is slated for downtown Rochester and in that DMC area. And in order for people to come to downtown without driving congestion up, without needing more and more and more places to park downtown, which takes up really valuable land, without expanding streets, again, taking up more of that valuable land, we need to find other ways to get people downtown. And so the city and the DMC and their partners are really looking to invest in high quality, high capacity transit. They're looking to invest in improved walking and biking infrastructure. They're incentivizing carpooling, and it's all to reach that mode share goal in the graphic on the right and really move a lot of those trips away from private automobile. So tonight we're talking about the planning around Rochester Rapid Transit. And so before we dive into that too far, we wanted to give a quick primer on what is it we're talking about? What is Rochester Rapid Transit? I like to say it is high capacity, high quality transit service. And by high capacity, I mean that it can carry a lot of people. The buses will run every 5 minutes during the peak periods, so almost no wait for a bus during those peak periods. The peak period is 6 to 9 a.m. and 3 to 6 p.m. on the weekdays. The buses will run every 10 minutes other times. They run from 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. on weekdays, 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. on weekends. They are likely going to be electric buses. They're carrying about 100 to 120 riders apiece. The stations, the infrastructure is also high quality. The buses only stop at dedicated stations. Those stations have shelters, they have light, they have heat, they have information about when the next buses are coming. You can pay your fare off board at the station, not on the bus. So you don't have to wrestle for change or worry about how to pay for your ride. And at the termini, there are what we're calling transit villages. So the idea is to build up those areas to be denser areas where people can live and easily catch the bus into downtown.
Okay, so now we're going to talk in more detail about the 2nd Street corridor. And just as a reminder, we've organized the corridor into a series of segments: the West Gateway, City Corridor, and the Broadway Corridor. And we'll be talking about the West Gateway and City Corridor, which are joined by 2nd Street Southwest tonight and Broadway next week. Okay, next. So this is where we want to start thinking about the West Gateway. And this is, has two kind of significant components. One is the West Transit Village, which is an area which is currently used as a employee parking lot by Mayo Clinic. So it's the west parking lot. And then also 2nd Street Southwest between 23rd and Highway 52, which is kind of an active suburban commercial and residential corridor. And we can see this area also has a number of neighborhoods, existing neighborhoods, some historic and some more recent vintage. And our vision for this gateway is of an activated urban corridor and a point of arrival for employees and visitors, understanding that this is a place where many, many people will arrive in the city, whether it's for work or whether it's for healthcare and other activities. And the first thing we looked at when we wanted to think about this area was, what's the connectivity framework? Thinking about what the route is today, the proposed route for the BRT, planned connections in terms of bike routes, and some existing connections, many of which run through the Cascade Lake area and the park system. It's one of the characteristics of Rochester that many of the trails actually run through major parks and along rivers and creeks through the city. But this is a framework that shows how some of those other connections relate to the bus rapid transit route. Okay, next. And we also wanted to look at what we consider to be the opportunity sites through this whole area, and in particular, in this case, looking at the West Gateway. But when we think about opportunity sites, we want to be clear that this is a variety of different kinds of opportunities. Some might be vacant land, and we'll probably see more of that when we talk about the Broadway corridor. Some may be surface parking lots, as is the case with the West lot today. And then others may be suburban developments which are relatively low density, may have their own surface parking lots which are serving smaller businesses or other activities today. And some of those may become more intensively developed in the next 20 years. And we are looking out to 2040. So we're taking a long-term view as well as looking at some more immediate opportunities. So as we start to talk about the scenario that we have here, there were some themes that we wanted you to think about. And these are around issues of whether there should be more homes, stores, and jobs focused around rapid transit stations, and we'll show some ideas for how those work. What you think about locating the stations, specifically at the Mayo West lot and 19th Avenue, which is an area that we are starting to hone in on as a location for the station. What other kinds of activities would you like to see at these locations? And what other biking and walking improvements are needed to make this area work? And this is an area that has largely been designed around the automobile over the last generation or so. So onto the West Village specifically. Now these are some ideas and some references of other developments that give us some clues as to what's the nature of the place that we'd like to create in the West Transit Village. And some key things to think about, that these are buildings that are brought to the street. It's more of an urban form than a suburban form. So parking is within buildings or behind buildings. These are very active in terms of active ground floors, which may be retail or businesses. The homes face onto the street. In some cases, homes may come down to the street level as well. A strong commitment to landscaping and the quality of the public realm. And then also streets that can accommodate lots of different ways of moving around, whether you are walking, riding a bike, taking transit, or also driving, acknowledging that people will be driving, and in this location would be continuing to drive to parking facilities that service the Mayo Clinic. So this is the land use framework that we've started to think about for this area. And what you can see here is the an idea of a collection of new homes, retail focused around the transit station, employee and visitor parking, and that would be wrapped on a number of sites by other uses, residential activities, residential development, and some potential ground floor activity as well. Resident and public parking, also in a separate structure, which you can see to the left on the west. And again, that would be wrapped by residential. And then new open space links through to the lake. So there's an idea of a central open space, which would be visible from 2nd Street and then would allow you to continue through to Cascade Lake. And in this case, the idea is that the bus rapid transit would travel on 2nd Street, heading west, then turn on into the site in a mid-block, and then come back around, pick people up at the station, and then circle back out to 2nd Street. And the idea here is to really bring some focus around the center of the site, that the open space would have a number of different activities, would be a place to visit, to stop, as well as to connect through to Cascade Lake. And the retail activity would be focused here, but that's also where it's closest to the transit station, and hopefully pick up activity and business and trade from commuters coming through, and people coming from the parking structure to the transit facility. So that's the land use framework. And then there is an idea of how we organize heights and density. So in this case, the key idea is the buildings would be higher on 2nd Street Southwest, but then they would step down to the lake edge. And the types of heights that we're talking about here would be 5 to 8 stories along 2nd Street, and that would also be where we are enclosing parking structures with other activities. So we'd be looking to screen that parking by other activities or with very high quality architectural and facade design, and then step down to 3 or 4 stories as it comes to the lake. Okay, next. So the next area we wanted to look at was further to the east, the area between 23rd Avenue and Highway 52. And these, again, are reference images of the types of activity we'd like to see in the area. And you can see that there's in some cases, there's a slightly different scale here. There are 3 and 4 story buildings. But again, some of the same ideas about having very active buildings that face the street, where there's transparency but between the inside and the outside of the buildings, very walkable streets as well, and streets that work for transit as well as for personal vehicles. And then there's the potential to step up in scale, particularly immediately around the station. And these are some examples of buildings that step up to 5, 6, 7, 8 stories. And there's an idea here that immediately around stations is the opportunity to accommodate higher density and potentially a more intensive mix of uses. Next. So Adele, do you want to talk about the station location?
Certainly. And maybe before I get into the this specific station location itself, I wanted to give a little bit of background on how our team kind of considered potential station locations. So when our charge in this planning process was to take a look at where the stations should be located and to think about them from a variety of perspectives and within a variety of contexts. So a few of the things that we considered were, does the station proximate, does it serve places where people want to go, whether it's places where a lot of people live or a lot of people work or a lot of people are attracted to for events. And so we looked at things like population density, employment density, development opportunities. Chris showed that slide of opportunity sites. So thinking about this both from the existing condition, what's there today, but also looking into the future, what might change in the area. Looking at how many transit-dependent people live in the area. And then considering, is it easy to walk or bike to this station location? What does the existing street grid look like? Is it well connected to the nearby neighborhoods? How are the sidewalks? How are the bike facilities? What's the streetscape quality like? And then finally, we also considered does the station work well for transit operations? The buses will have a feature on them called transit signal priority, which basically allows the buses and the traffic signals to communicate. And so buses can hold greens or trip the signal to turn to green. And that system works well when stations are at intersections. It allows us to take advantage of that technology. And then we also considered, if any of you attended the open houses in early February, we had a questionnaire there asking folks about where their preferred station locations were. And so we looked at all the feedback that we got from those as well. So our station location recommendation in this segment is to be at 19th Avenue. And I hope as I was saying some of the things we considered, you can start to see why 19th Avenue stands out. It offers the best access to the biggest swath of the neighborhood. Because it's at a four-way intersection, if you get off the bus there, you can really go in all four directions. And that's walking and biking. We did recognize that there are some gaps in the walking and biking infrastructure around there. There's some gaps in sidewalks. And that's also part of the purpose of this planning effort, is to identify some of those improvements that could be made in these station locations. We also, the streetscape quality is very nice at 19th Avenue. The planted medians, the pedestrian scale lighting, marked crosswalks, the fact that it is at an intersection, so the pedestrians crossing the street have a protected crossing. And then we also wanted to, we also considered maybe a station at 23rd Avenue, but the relative level of density in this segment of the corridor, we felt doesn't really warrant a second station between the West Lot and St. Mary's. And so we think 19th Avenue serves the majority of the corridor. There are gonna be a few destinations that fall just outside of an easy walk to 19th Avenue or just outside of an easy walk to the Mayo West Lot. But there aren't too many. We felt like we could reach the critical mass here at 19th Avenue. So I hope I covered everything for 19th. I'll let Chris kind of finish the story about this segment.
Yeah, and thanks, Adele. And you made a really good point about the quality of the streetscape here as well. And I think that is something that we would like to see extended further west as the rapid transit system comes in and as the West Lot is developed, continuing the nature of that street in terms of its walkability, its bikeability, the landscape as well. So when we look at land uses for this segment, you can see that we have focused mixed use around the station and then feathered away to more of a residential idea further away. And when we say mixed use, we expect there will be a strong residential component here, But then there would be retail and other residentially led services and amenities as well, in terms of what people need day to day. And again, we'd be focusing on the station in terms of stepping up in terms of heights. So right around 19th Street and towards Highway 52, stepping up to 5 to 8 stories. And this is an area which both has, in the future, would have enhanced transit service. But there's also something about the scale of Highway 52 as well as an infrastructure, and the bridge infrastructure, that feels like it can handle some higher development and greater density of development, given the scale of that infrastructure. But we would step down to 3 to 4 stories further west on 2nd Street. Okay. So questions, so key questions, or if any questions came through in the Q&A. Jarrett, do you want to flag any of those for us?
Sure. This is the opportunity. This is one of the opportunities that I discussed earlier, where we're going to allow you to, if you have a question, you ask your question live. To do that, you click the raise your hand feature. We'll call on you, then we'll unmute you, and then give you some time to ask your question. Let's see. I did have one hand raised, but it went down. So I will go ahead and try to answer one of the questions that were ask one of the questions that was submitted via the box. And that question was Fire Station number 3 considered as part of the development plan for the future building site? Not to remove the station, but to incorporate it into a larger building. Chris or Adele, do you want to take a stab at this one?
That's a really interesting question and kind of opportunity that's been raised. We haven't looked at that specifically at this point. You know, working on the assumption that there's an important governmental and public facility, and that it provides service to the surrounding area, and also presumably provides service out to highways across the rest of the area as well. But it's an interesting question, and we've certainly seen examples where firehouses have been incorporated into other developments as well. So as 2nd Street Southwest develops over the next 20 years, there might be an idea of kind of how to consider reorienting that facility, or potentially locating, if that were feasible, in order to in order to provide some further development opportunities. But yeah, certainly an important question. And one of the things we have been thinking about is the spacing of traffic control signals. And of course, the firehouse has, it's really important that that access is prioritized for emergency vehicles and first responders to access the surrounding highway framework.
Thank you, Chris. We have a question from Joel. Joel, give you a second, give you to unmute your mic. And Joel, what is your question? No? It seems like seems like we might have an issue there.
Oh, okay. Give me a moment.
Oh, no.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Yes, Joel, go ahead.
Okay. The question I have, and I was thinking about listening to the thing about the sidewalks, the gaps in the transit areas for like the sidewalks for walking and biking. Now, when you add to the new ones, or you create the new ones, what happens with the old sections? Do we just upgrade them to equal the new ones, or do we leave them in place and just try to repair them as needed in the future, or how do you want to do that?
That's a great question. Some of that I think I'll take a stab at from the city side. Some of that will depend on how old that infrastructure is, and what our plans moving forward for that infrastructure might be. Adele, do you have any addition that you could add to this?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that I think there might be some segments where there are whole blocks that don't have sidewalks today. And so, you know, it's sort of a question of how that infrastructure gets accommodated. It does seem like a very localized infrastructure investment, right? So, you know, in some cases you might have streets that have curb and gutter and are an urban section, and so the street section looks a certain way. Other sections might not have a curb and gutter and are more of a rural section, and so I think it'll be very localized question of how new sidewalks get accommodated.
Very good. Thank you, Adele. I just received word that our Julie, our person behind the scenes, that if you want to raise your hand and ask a question just like Joel did, that we might have to give you a little extra, and Julie a little extra time to make sure that you go ahead and give you a second to ask that question. Right now, I don't see anyone's hands raised. With that, maybe we can continue forward, Chris?
Yeah, or what, are there some Q&As coming in?
All right, yes, there are. Would you like to take one?
Sure, if we can.
Sure. Question from Jason here. At the transit hub station, are you concerned about conflicts between noise and bus movement with the station in the middle of a retail street? Would you consider shifting the open space to the west and north of the station to better orient to the lake? I think, Chris, this might be up for you, but a little more about.
Yeah, you know, it's a really interesting question. So, yeah, we've had some discussions about the location of the open space. I think there was quite a strong sense that you should be able to see through the site. That from 2nd Street, this is the opportunity to continue the view to the lake. So that's why there's kind of a central space. In terms of bus movements and noise, I think as Adele said, these are going to be very contemporary, high technology vehicles. So we're not expecting kind of the noise that you would normally have with clanking of gears and maybe a diesel-based bus from 20 or 30 years ago. These will be very contemporary, and so hopefully it will be very quiet as well. And there is a question of kind of bus activity in the middle of the retail street, and there may be a difference in the type of retail which is on the south side of the street next to the platform and the boarding space for the bus, which may be much more kind of around coffee and grab and go and quicker kinds of activities. And then on the north side, it could be a slightly different kind of retail. And then there are also some ideas about wrapping some of that retail, so a little of it also faces the lake, so that there could be more of a kind of a sit-down ambience and food and beverage linked to that. But it's not unusual to have intensity of activity, and at a certain level, intensity of activity is good because it brings energy and vitality and focus. So I hope that gives you some insight into our thinking, but if you have further thoughts on this, please drop us a note also. Okay.
Thank you, Chris. With that being said, I think we need to move on to the St. Mary's to 6th Avenue section.
Okay. So the next section is what we're calling the City Corridor, and this encompasses the area of 2nd Street around St. Mary's campus and then connects all the way through to 6th Avenue. And we see the vision for this as being a diverse city-scale corridor with enhanced connections between St. Mary's and downtown. And when we say city-scale, one of the interesting things about Rochester is that it actually has a very defined sense of a downtown, and it's historic downtown and very strongly anchored by Mayo Clinic. But the future is likely to see continued growth along these major corridors. And in some ways, thinking about a central city as opposed to a traditional downtown. And central cities have different relationships with corridors that expand from them. At the same time, it's really important to emphasize that the existing neighborhoods are incredibly valued. And this is about focusing on opportunity sites, and again, surface parking lots, vacant land, other kinds of sites that will be up for, have the potential to see new activities over the next 20 years. And in this case, we may be looking at some activities that are higher density. St. Mary's itself is actually quite high density as a larger building, and there's been some more significant recent developments also. But we think there's an opportunity here for employment, jobs, institutions, as well as residential and some retail. But there could potentially be a step up in the scale of activity within this corridor. Next. So a similar approach in terms of the method here. First, we look at the connections. And here there are much more intensive connections than there were in the area further to the west. So you can see the bus routes, the bike routes, the trail system, how that trail system relates to open spaces. And you can see actually this is quite a networked area. And of course has a significant, historically has a significant traffic roll with vehicles coming from Highway 52 and connecting into downtown. And these are the areas that we identified as opportunity sites. And you can see how these kind of relate to some proposed station locations as well. One would be at St. Mary's Hospital, one would be on 2nd Street around 9th Avenue, and then one would be around 6th. We see this area as having opportunities for an expanded St. Mary's district, more bioscience, more healthcare, more housing, more hotel, and then infill development between 9th and 6th Avenue. And thinking about 6th Avenue as a gateway, that this is kind of a gateway to the core, the historic and traditional core of downtown. Okay, next. And some things to think about as we take you through some of the other diagrams. Again, what activities could be added to benefit existing residents? So while new things come along, what is it that residents within the existing communities would like to see happen at St. Mary's, at 9th Avenue, or 6th Avenue? What kinds of public spaces are needed for existing residents, future residents, workers? What kinds of spaces do people need? How could the St. Mary's open space be used in the future? And what bike and walking improvements are needed through this area? Okay, next. So Dal, you want to talk us through the idea for the station first?
Yeah, so the 2nd Street at St. Mary's Hospital station is probably pretty intuitive, I think, given the criteria that I mentioned before, especially serving places where people want to go. Obviously, St. Mary's is a major destination for employees, also for visitors, and we know there's a lot of trips that are made between the downtown Mayo campus and St. Mary's. So this is a high traffic, high ridership station. It, serves St. Mary's, but also serving Kutsky Park to the north and historic Southwest neighborhood to the south, and some of the hotel and commercial functions around there. So I think tentatively right now, part of the project is to have a transit center here, a bit bigger facility than a regular station, just because of the expected level of ridership and the number of people that would pass through on a given day. A second station is planned at or proposed at 9th Avenue. And this one is a much more kind of future looking station. And it is about a 1/4 mile from St. Mary's, and about a quarter mile from 6th Avenue, which is our next proposed station. So these stations are closer together because this area is much more dense with activity. And one of the important features of a 9th Avenue station would be planned or proposed. I shouldn't say it's proposed, it's not that imminent, but there is about 1.5 million square feet of new development planned for in this area. The land is primarily owned by Mayo Clinic, so the development would be, you know, at their discretion. And so there might be some interest in this station being a future station, meaning that you might put in the basic infrastructure, the underground infrastructure, when you're building the rest of the project, and then fill out the station once that development arrives and buses start stopping there once that development is realized. That's a possibility here. We did see some support for this station among attendees at the February open house. So 6th Avenue, this was a very popular station location among attendees at the open house. I think it's a fairly intuitive one in that it serves downtown and kind of that edge of the true core of downtown. It's easily accessible from north, south, east, and west, and it's on Rochester Public Transit. Route 11 goes north-south through that intersection, and then it also is adjacent to a planned bike lane on 6th Avenue. So this was a pretty straightforward station location selection, and there is, I think, a plan for a hotel on the northwest corner. I know we heard directly from those folks at the February open house that they were excited to have the station in front of their building. So I think a lot of support for a station in this location.
Okay, and then just to kind of follow up on that, those ideas of stations have really helped us think about the land use and heights and densities through this area. So what you'll see is a mixed use focus at stations, but also close to intersections as well. So at 6th and 10th, and looking at residential infill between those locations. So next. And then in terms of the heights and densities, again, taller buildings at stations, taller buildings at intersections, the places that are most connected become the most active and the densest. And then we step down in between the stations. And the lowest heights in this area would be between 9th and 7th. And there is a kind of a local character on that segment of 2nd Street, which we wanted to respond to as well. So, I think, yeah, should we go to some questions, Jarrett? And maybe we could flip back just to the heights diagram while we're taking some of those questions so people can see those.
Yeah, currently at this time, we don't have anyone has their hand raised to ask a question live, but we received a few questions via the question box. So we'll go ahead and try to tackle a couple of those until we get it live. One of the questions that came on in was someone vocalized their opinion that they liked the 9th Avenue station. But they wondered, had we thought about trying to continue the pedestrian connection north through the Kutsky Park area? Their response was, or their question is, it seems like a super long block to make people walk around the area. Chris or Adele, I don't know which one to direct this question to, but whoever wants to take it.
Well, I think we should both take it because there are probably two angles to it. One is probably a real estate question and cost question, and the other is the movement level. But it is a long block, and it doesn't have a connection through. And I think in some of the previous plans, there has been some discussion of could you make a connection through. But of course, it's in many cases, this is privately owned property, and that could create a cost there to create that connection. But there is always the opportunity, and maybe we can look at this in more detail as we go along, where there is the potential for a larger site or a larger development, that could be something that's incorporated into the planning for that larger site in the future. But yeah, it's an interesting block in the sense of the grid here, particularly immediately west of downtown, has long blocks, and so it's not that porous. So it would be great to find some opportunities to open that up.
Yeah, I would. The only thing I would add to that is that it definitely did give us some, hesitation about this station location, and I think the real driver of the station location is that it is poised to be an area of pretty dynamic change. And so, kind of as Chris mentioned, with that change, it seems possible that you could create some new connections, make the station just a bit more accessible, both to the north and also to the south as well, and connecting it into Pill Hill and the neighborhood to the south.
Thank you both. I want to take this opportunity to say that many people are submitting questions via the question box. It is our intent that to take these questions that are submitted and go ahead and answer them and post those answers on our webpage. We went ahead and all the questions that were submitted as part of the April 7th webinar have been answered and posted on the webpage. So those questions are on there, and we intend to do the same with the questions that are coming in right now. With that, I still don't see anyone's hand raised, but I do have one question. Maybe this is more in Chris's wheelhouse. On the land use diagram, can you describe the dispersal of mixed use, assuming that ground floor retail versus concentrated retail to create a destination?
Yeah, and the idea here is that the retail is located immediately around stations or where you have intersections with north-south routes as well. So that's what drives the retail. And I think the retail we're talking about here is primarily ground floor. This wouldn't be the type of retail that is a competitor to the core downtown. This is meeting the needs of local residents, workers, and visitors. And for visitors, their kind of daily needs, and for workers, probably their daily needs as well. But I think there is the opportunity here to think about a range of different types of food and beverage. Of course, there's breakfast, lunch, and kind of grab and go, those requirements. But as the corridor develops, there should certainly be opportunities for dining and evening food and beverage also. And you'll notice that we've focused employment in this area close to the 9th Avenue station, or proposed 9th Avenue station, and then also close to 2nd Street as well. And this is in some ways to kind of respond to a lot of input we had about the level of movement during the day and during working hours between the core downtown and Mayo Clinic and St. Mary's. And we expect that to continue. The people who work in the central city of Rochester will likely be moving around during their day, going to meetings, going to consultations, if they're in the healthcare industry, meeting with patients or conferencing, or if they're in bioscience or technology sectors, collaborating with others who are located elsewhere. So we wanted to organize that employment around stations. And that is slightly different than the area we looked at to the west, where it's more of a residential focus. And then the mixed use is more about retail and community services for residents.
Thank you, Chris. At this moment, I don't see any hands raised. Why don't we go through and maybe give people a little bit more time. If they have one more larger question, to go ahead and go ahead and press that raise your hand button. We really would like to hear from you and hear it from you directly. So why don't we give some people some time to think of maybe one last question, and then Chris, why don't you move back to the slides?
Sure. So yeah, do we want to talk about the these feedback routes as well? A reminder again, there are multiple ways to connect through the web page where there is further information, and encourage everybody to look at the story maps tool, which will give you more time to kind of investigate some of the information we've presented tonight, and then also other tools, including the web page and a survey tool as well on specific issues. And of course, there's the opportunity for direct emails in, and then also leave a voicemail. We will be bringing together the inputs received through these various routes, and as we go along, producing FAQs, which will be, hopefully will answer a lot of the questions. And then if there are specific issues, of course, there's the opportunity for an individual conversation as well.
Thank you, Chris. With that, I'll see if there's anyone else that wants to raise their hand and ask a question before we end for the night. But I did receive one more typed in question while you're going through that feedback channels, Chris, and that was the question of traffic, and has that been considered at this moment? And the answer is no, it has not. We're moving into the next, this stage, and this study is focused in on land use and station locations. We have already moving into the next phase, and that is the engineering and environmental phase of the project. During this phase, we will do an in-depth study of traffic analysis and what the impact may be on the corridor itself and on the surrounding neighborhood. That is both on the issue of designated transit lanes, whether to use those or not, and then also where traffic may go if we do use the designated transit lanes. With that, I think, Adele, would you have any addition that you would want to add to that type of question, or?
No, I think you covered it, Jarrett.
Thank you. I'll check one more time for a raised hand. With that being said, we're right on the nose at 7 o'clock. I'm going to, well, actually, we just had a question come on in, and essentially states, this is also a major corridor for utilities. Is there any big picture utility upgrades plan that could prevent having to re-excavate the roadway in the future? For example, tunnels or conduits through which utilities could be run without digging. I don't know if Adele or Chris really have an opinion on this one, but I'll speak for the city and say that is the plan. We will do some utility updates with this project, mainly to improve make sure we have the information at on-demand information at the transit station. But I will say included with the project is a complete reconstruction of 2nd between 11th and 16th, kind of in that St. Mary's area, at which point I know we'll probably be looking at and trying to do some utilities with that complete reconstruction of the roadway too. With that being said, I'll take a quick look back at our hands, no hands raised. Chris or Adele, any last comments from you?
None for me. I did just see a question come up about a tunnel at St. Mary's Station. Maybe should we talk about that?
Sure, right ahead. I think I can start off and say that we recently went through, there's been as part of the St. Mary's Station improvements, a tunnel underneath 2nd Street has been proposed as part of that project. I can tell you and answer the question right now that as part of our larger project that includes the reconstruction of 2nd Street and also includes enhancements and enhanced St. Mary's Hospital Station, we are including a pedestrian tunnel as part of that project. So that will be looked at and moved forward as well. With that, I will say thank you very much for everyone attending and being flexible in this virtual format that we have going on this month in April. Once again, we'll push you to our feedback, the phone number, 507-328-2025, the email, rapidtransit@rochestermm.gov. And then also, please check out the interactive open house and the survey questions that we have on that. When you close your browser today, you will be kicked to one of those surveys, so you can help answer those questions. So there's the same questions that Chris went through before he went through all of the analysis and details of those corridors. We would really love you to take some time and look at that a little further and give us a response on some of those survey questions. With that, I'll say thank you very much and have a good night.